everyone. What's going on? Welcome back to another quick episode. This is a little different today. I don't do this, but I'm going to do this because I feel like it's incredibly important to address something that's kind of come forward. So the whole goal of what I've been doing with the Kelsi Sheren perspective in the past few years and my advocacy work and my traveling across the globe to talk about MAID, not MAIDs, because that's not a thing, MAID, which is medical assistance in dying, is so that we can educate the population so that the pro-death narrative and cults that have come into the globe, the 80 federations, by the way, there are 80, and 63 active, are completely in lockstep when it comes to verbiage, legislation, and how they're going to convince the government to expand into a larger global assisted, I know YouTube hates this word, suicide problem. But I'm forgoing the fact that YouTube hates these words, and I'm going to talk about a subject like I always have, but from a different angle. So there is a couple podcasters that are quite famous. I've been fortunate to have one of them on my show, and then I've also been fortunate to sit down and chat with the other. And I respect their opinions and their shows immensely. This is why I actually reached out to them before I recorded this and gave them a heads up. And I was very clear to say that I respect you guys. I love what you do, but there's a problem with what you just said. Now, it's not because I think what they said was wrong and they weren't trying. The whole goal of what I've been doing is trying to wake up an entire globe to the idea that eugenics is back and in style and is the next way to mitigate population, whether it's because of financial issues, whether it's because of economic despair within the country itself, or whether it is because of immigration overload on the nation. Whatever the reason is, MAID is here, and it doesn't look like it's going anywhere. Now, I wanted to talk about the episode with Shawn Ryan and Tucker Carlson. Again, this is not to in any way bash either of these people. I have reached out to Shawn now for 2 years, asking to have this conversation about MAID. Most people think this is a Canadian problem. That's how you know they don't understand. This is not a Canada problem. We're just the worst. America, you are killing your own people with the same program. The only difference is most people are doing it quietly. There are organizations in the United States outside of Dying with Dignity, and there's a huge high level amount of people and list available that we'll make available for you guys to see of these nonprofits in America taking your taxpayer dollars and doing what Dying with Dignity does in Canada, backdoor meetings with your senators and with your individuals. And I know this because I have sat down with your United States State Department and had this conversation. Come to find out, they were not aware either. That's an insane statement, but it is also fact. Now, we're going to go through this. There is a 3-minute clip I'm going to break down. So forgive me. We're going to do this with my producer a little differently. I'm going to play some of this here. I'm going to timestamp it, and then we're going to splice in those pieces so we can respond directly to the parts that I'm having issues with. The reason why I am doing this is very, very simple. I have tried now to talk to Tucker about this, and it's been radio silence. I've tried to talk to Shawn about this. This has been radio silence. The reason this is problematic is because they're not understanding that when you go on the world's largest platforms and you say a stat like this is how the pro-death cults get you. People can mess up. That happens. I do it all the time. And then I tell you where I mess up and I correct it. But here's the problem. Dying with Dignity is worth over $9 million. These other organizations are heavily funded people. And what they will do is they will pull apart that interview right there. And once they get a hold of it, they're going to make clips out of it. And they will defame and discredit anything and everything that comes about the MAID conversation based on their inaccuracies. I know this to be fact because I've been the target of them, Dying with Dignity, and the Canadian government now for years about this subject. There are things they got right, but paraphrasing isn't good enough. Not around something this severe, not around something this dramatic, and sure as hell not around something this important. Now, for those of you who say, but Kelsi, why would you go after them? I'm not. I'm trying to help them understand that this is so much bigger than they realize and moving at a pace that's so fast And your laws are changing, America, to approve this. And some of your Republicans are voting for it, including the ones in Montana. If I were to sit here and ask them what states have this approved, they would not know the answers. They wouldn't know even what's coming for approval. So to sit there and paraphrase, I am concerned. It's not to say I am perfect and I know everything, but I've been doing this long enough with enough researchers, scientists, doctors, lawyers, and whistleblowers that have come to me as the person to cover the subject. So let's cover the subject, shall we? This episode came out this week. It was a great episode. Loved it until we got to the MAID subject. Let me make it clear. Tucker, it's not MAIDs. And yes, it does matter. The acronyms do matter because people won't pay attention to the subject if you're not saying it accurately. So it's MAID. It's medical assistance in dying. Yes, it is state-sponsored killing. You're not wrong about that. Yes, it is eugenics. Yes, it is happening disproportionately to white people. You're not wrong about that. But the numbers are wrong. It's not with machines. That's also not true. So Shawn, when you said it's with machines, that's not true. So let's pull up the episode right now and let's take a listen.
If I sound defensive, it's because we have all been trained to ignore this amazing thing that's never happened before in history, where one group of people is being destroyed and of course have internalized that and are now enthusiastically participating in their own destruction and the death of an entire group of people. And it really is, like if you go to Great Britain, it's the whites who can't wait to kill themselves. It's in Canada, same thing. They have the MAIDs program, which is...
Okay, so we're going to timestamp at 32 seconds there. It's not the MAIDs program. I know it seems like small, but again, these things matter. They went after me for less on trigonometry. They will do it to you. Not that you guys care, but it actually does affect how we get legislators to listen to us to stop these laws from expansion. So it is MAID, M-A-I-D, medical assistance in dying, not MAIDs. They don't kill multiple at a time unless that's requested. So that's a big one. Again, may seem like a small thing, but trust me when I say they will use anything they can to discredit the conversation, and we cannot allow for it. The subject is too important.
The state-sponsored killing of its own citizens. Physician-assisted suicide. No, it's the state encouraging people to kill themselves. And it's one of the leading causes of death in Canada is this MAIDs program.
These are the machines that these...
No, Shawn, it's not machines. You're thinking of the death pod that was created in Europe. Now, that's not being used. It's illegal, and it is a different form of technology. So that technology is a gas that is used. A person goes in, answers 3 questions, hits a button, and then it essentially sucks the air out of the pod. Now, that's not happening. Yes, it has been used, but it is not happening. That's not fact. That is incorrect. We do not use machines to kill people. Unfortunately, we use doctors and RN nurses. And we also use just regular old nurses. And we also use 2 people. And when I say 2 people, that is to approve the process. So no machines are being used. That's not true. I can understand how the confusion happens, but that's not true. So let's point that out, because if we have people thinking that machines are walking around killing people, that's going to be a problem.
No, the state is licensed to kill its citizens. The citizen just goes in and said, I want to be killed, and they kill you.
No, so that's also not true. Yes, it does sound like it, and I would agree with you that it does sound like you go in and the state kills you. It's a little more complicated than that. So let's break this down. There are multiple track ways for an individual to go get physician-assisted suicide, euthanasia. And they're a lot more complicated than just walking in and saying it. It sounds like it, but it is a lot worse. So there is, in 2016 was track 1. That's when Carter versus Canada came through on the Supreme Court, and she challenged the Supreme Court and won. Now, track 1 is one of the ways where you are supposed to go through if you are terminally ill only, meaning the criteria is a natural foreseeable death, and it means you have an irremediable and grievous condition, which means you're going to die in a very short period of time. So you will qualify under track 1 for a terminal illness and any other comorbidity after that. But you still have to go through a 2-step process, meaning you have to apply and then you have to be approved by 2 different physicians, not 1, but 2. And yes, trust me, there are plenty of doctors using the same second person. And so there are cases where the second individual is almost paid, if you will, to sign on as the second doctor. And when there's complicated cases and only one doctor signs, sometimes they don't even get a second doctor to sign, which means they cannot get access to MAID. So that is track 1. Now, track 2, to be clear, is different than track 1. Track 2 is for non-foreseeable death, meaning you do not have a terminal illness and you have what's called irremediable and grievous condition. Your life is so hard that you can't imagine living like that. Now, track 2 has very specific criteria, not, hey, I want to die. Although there is a loophole to getting into track 1, and we'll talk about that in a second. But track 2, you can apply for fragility, for diabetes, for other cancers that aren't necessarily terminal. And in Quebec, you can also do this thing called advanced request. You're maybe early onset dementia and you want to apply now because you know you won't be able to make that decision for yourself later on down the road, and you can fill out an application now. Now, here's the tricky part about track 2 versus track 1. Track 2 is how a lot of people are currently qualifying because the criteria to meet is very different than criteria 1 for track 1. But the way you jump from track 2 to track 1 is to say these words: I am no longer eating or drinking. And you automatically become terminal. You become terminal because the body cannot live without a certain amount of days without food or water. That in itself will make you sound like you are going to have a death soon. And you will, because that's how it works. Starving someone to death and dehydrating them to death, you will die. Now, that is a 90-day waiting period. But here's the thing. We know for sure, we have evidence of and proof of people who have been killed a lot faster. Track 1 can go as fast as 24 hours. Track 2 is an up to 90-day waiting period with still 2 doctors or physicians approving the process for you to get access to medical assistance in dying. So those are 2 very different subjects. Now, Tucker said in this clip that it was mental illness. For anybody for mental illness, for whatever, you can go and get it.
And basically for any reason, mental health problems, financial problems, a lot of poor people are just like
That's also not true. So when he talks about for mental problems, for financial problems, he's kind of right, but he's also wrong. Let me explain. I know that sounds complicated. You're like, but Kelsi, now you're nitpicking. But let me just be very clear. When it comes to this subject, you have to nitpick because this is how the law works and words matter. So mental illness for MAID alone is not legal. Doesn't mean it's not happening. It's not legal until March of 2027. The first floor, like the bill for the floor, is actually being read. I believe it's next week or the week after. And then we will see another reading, I believe in January or February. And in March, we will know if this is going to go in and pass on the floor as a new law, meaning anybody with any mental illness can then qualify specifically under that new law. But that currently, as it sits of November 28th, 2025, is illegal and is not supposed to be. And if you're just listening, those are aggressive bunny ears, supposed to be happening. Now, does it happen? For sure. But it's illegal. And because Health Canada and these MAID killers are under a self-reporting system, it's very easy to hide it. And we know that to be fact as well. And the place you take a look at that is the Ontario Coroner Report from last year, which shows very clearly that there's over 400 non-compliant deaths. Now, if you were to take time, like the rest of us do, and break down every single coroner report from every single province independently, you would see very clearly where the trends are. You would see the data of it, and you would understand that fragility over mental illness and terminal illness is actually one of the highest rates and the reasons why people are qualifying. That just means you're getting old and frail, which is kind of crazy. So these are really important points to point out. This subject can't be messed with. They will use it against us in this fight to stop it. So we have to be very clear here.
I feel like I'm a burden to the country. I want to go die, and the state will kill you. It's one of the leading causes of death in Canada. So the numbers came out yesterday. Well, who's doing this? So Canada is about 65% white, something like that. It's completely changed.
Well, first off, yes, the Canadian population, white population, is disintegrating. We know that by the minute. Over 800,000 people from India were brought in alone this year. Canada is crashing. That's not to be argued. You're right on that. But let's talk about the percentages that he's breaking up here.
Heavily South Asian and Indian, Bangladeshi, Pakistani. And lots of other peoples. You know, it's massive immigration into Canada. But who's being killed by the state in Canada? It's like 97% legacy whites. Literally.
So here's the only time, and you guys are going to say, Kelsi, it's a percent, get over it. But a percent is a human life. It is multiple human lives. And it's really important that we don't mess around with this again. Currently, as it states, it's 1 in 20 Canadians. It's almost 5% of the death population in the country. Yes, it is one of the leading causes, but it is not the leading cause. Also, the population that is having MAID pushed on or are using is 96% white. Yes, it's 1%, but you guys don't seem to understand how much they will use one inaccuracy against us when it comes to fighting up against the devil here. And this is why I'm taking this very, very seriously. So if we're going to just verbatim results, that's cool. But then say you don't really know much about it so that we can all be clear to not know that we know that you don't know much about it. And that's fine, but let's stop claiming we do.
What the hell is that? And of course, these are people who have been told and now believe that like they're a burden to society. It's selfish to have children. They've been totally brainwashed into mass suicide.
So let's talk about why we've been brainwashed into mass suicide. And by the way, again, Tucker, so have you. America is doing it to its own people, and you guys still haven't caught on. You haven't talked about it. You haven't addressed it. You haven't brought it up. You have 10 states in one jurisdiction doing it. So instead of just sitting there and saying this is a Canadian problem, here's what I think we should do. I think we should break down the numbers. I think we should look at the states. And I think that we should have a conversation about some of the most well-educated people in the community. And one of those is Alex Schadenberg. So let's go into, as of 2025, what states in America, not Canada, are actually doing this to your own people? You currently have 10 states in one jurisdiction. And in the past 3 laws, there has been no new state legislation. But in 2024 alone, 20 states have brought legalization bills forward. And Colorado has expanded their assisted suicide law. So that on its own, this is not a Canadian problem, friends. This is for sure another problem. Let's go deeper. 2025, you have 18 states with assisted suicide legalization bills. Delaware passed the assisted suicide bill in 2025. And the ones we're actually quite concerned about right now that hopefully, if we're going to discuss this again, we can lean into these so that your people can wake up too. Illinois, Mass, and New York. And in 2025, Vermont, Oregon, Washington State, California, Maine, and New Jersey have assisted suicide expansion bills. And this is the stat you should pay attention to, nearly every single state that has legalized assisted suicide has expanded later to their new assisted suicide law. Most of these bills are Trojan horses. Most of them are lobbied by these assisted suicide death cults to put pressure on the government and expand the law. This is why words matter. And once the state has legalized assisted suicide, the group that is comparable to dying with dignity, but in America, is called Compassion and Choices. They will challenge it in court. And such a court will remove the residency requirement. So let me just be very clear. The residency requirement, once gone, means anybody can go state by state to the ones that have legal bills and get killed there. Some of your states have more expansive bills, but we believe that these votes are going to go through. This isn't me. This is also others. And this is how you know this is actually what's going to happen. When you have the executive director in mass of Dying with Dignity saying on a similar bill, once you get something passed, you can always work on the amendments later. Again, this is America. Amy Pollin, sponsor of the New York bill, recently stated, we've been criticized for some organizations that actually want expansion, and we've held firm because they just want to get it passed first. That's New York. Josh Elliott of the Connecticut bill sponsor said he wants heavily safeguarded assisted suicides bills, and he wants them through, and then he will make the amendments later. This is a huge problem. So stop saying it's all Canada. It's not. You guys just aren't listening. Here's what's crazy about America. They are looking at permitting assisted suicide by telehealth to enable and approve assisted suicide in places where no doctor is willing to go or where it's legal. And when you define assisted suicide as a form of treatment and you allow it for chronic conditions rather than just terminal, that's how you get to track 2. And when you establish regional assisted suicide centers with no resident requirement, that means everybody is up for death. Let's take a look quickly at Oregon's 2024 numbers. They may not seem like anything big, but this is how Canada started. In 2024, Oregon report indicated that 376 reported assisted suicide deaths, but they had over 607 prescriptions written. So where's all the other death drugs is my question. And only 3 referrals for a psychiatric assessment out of 607 prescriptions. That means only 3 actual legal referrals were done for psychiatric assessment, but yet 607 prescriptions in America for death were written. 96 people died from natural causes, and the ingestion status unknown, with 178 people who received that lethal poison out of that data. And out of the 178 people, 87 of those ingested the status, and we don't actually know if they died or not. That's how crazy we are in America. There were over 400 assisted suicide deaths in 2024 in Oregon. And the longest time of death in Oregon, America, was 137 hours in 2023. And in 2024, it took someone 26 hours to die. 23 people outlived the 6-month prognosis that they were given. And many of the people who died by assisted suicide could have lived longer. 23 of those assisted suicide deaths were out-of-state deaths, i.e. illegal. There were complications were reported by healthcare providers. And in 2024, there were 9 complications based out of 121 deaths. And in 2023, there were 10 known complications out of 102 deaths, representing an almost 10% completion rate. So why is that important for you guys to hear? There were 386 reported deaths in 2023. And since the complication data is only 102, we might have actually more deaths with complications in 2023 alone, sitting at the number of 38. So in 2023, California had an assisted suicide report where 884 people had assisted suicide deaths. But again, 1,281 lethal poisonings were actually prescribed. So where are the rest of those drugs? And in 2023, we know that the status is unknown for 276 deaths on the ingestion because it is not machines, because we don't allow the doctors in America to do IVs. What we do is this. The doctor pours the poison into a cup, and it hands you the poison like this. And now it is your responsibility to pick up the cup, raise it to your mouth, and drink it. It is different than Canada, but it is still happening. When we take a look constantly at these cases and the legal requirements and them challenging it in court, in 2022, Compassion and Choices launched a court case challenging the Vermont assisted suicide requirement. And Oregon and Vermont have removed their residency requirement now because of this. Meaning, when you get it wrong, it affects law. And when it affects law, people die. This is why it's a problem. When you remove the truth from these people, they will use it to fight you. And this is the uncomfortable truth. Compassion and Choices in America is just as evil as dying with dignity in Canada. And don't get me wrong, there is a dying with dignity in America that is just as bad. So why is this all so important? Because if we don't get this right, people die. If we get the stats wrong, you're forgetting those that have been murdered. Should we not get it right? When we talk about a veteran death, we're expected to get it right. When we talk about somebody who killed themselves, we're expected to get it right. When you have one of the #1 podcasts in the globe, both of you, we expect you to get it right. And it's okay to bounce around, but not when the fights are this close and when the devil is knocking at your door. There is so much more data here to be said about America that is just frankly insane. And for some reason, nobody wants to hear it. Is it because America is unaware? I don't think so. Is it because Americans are unaware? Yes. So how do we educate them to stop it in your own states? Well, we have the conversation. I get, for whatever reason, I know how this podcast world works. Somebody doesn't like you, then that person won't talk to you. I get it. And you can always choose to speak to whomever you want. But at a bare minimum, if we're going to talk about the subject I spend every waking minute on, and others who support me, the doctors, the lawyers, the scientists, the researchers, the nonprofits, can we at least get it right? Or try to? Because to scare people into believing that, well, frankly, machines are doing it, well, that's wrong. That's not accurate. And let's talk about the drugs. None of the drugs that are being used for killing are FDA approved. And no one is saying that. Nobody is talking about the mechanism of death except for me. And now Jordan Peterson, because we spoke about it together. So I'm asking you, do a bit of a dive before you throw numbers out. Because we do know the numbers. We do have the data. And let's just be very clear. In 2023, our data shows that 15,343 were reported deaths. In 2022, it was 13,241. And in 2021, it was 10,092. And as of last year, the new data shows 16,499. Quebec had 7.6% of its deaths in 2024. They were all deaths. Those 7.6% were death by MAID. It is the highest in the world. And Canada does have euthanasia of veterans with PTSD because we've helped break those stories. And we just had some more on the show. And I just got a message today. 2 more whistleblowers are also coming on. Euthanasia is based on homelessness, poverty, disability, and more. So we just have to be careful when we talk about it. If we're going to talk about it, let's get it right. And let's stop pretending this is just a Canadian issue. This is a UK issue, Australia, New Zealand, Denmark. And luckily, the Slavics just stopped it. But America, you have 10 states and 1 jurisdiction and are expanding rapidly. So I encourage you, if you want to understand this stuff, let's have a chat. Or we could just read this and say it out loud and at least give our people a fighting chance to know what they're up against. 96% are white. America is expanding. So don't act like it's not going to reach out and touch you, because I do promise you it will. All right, my friends. That's it. We can go through this anytime. I've always said I'm happy to get on the planes. I'm always said I'm happy to bring other scientists with me. But we can't keep accepting that just because it's said it's accurate. So at least let's say it accurately.
And of course, none of this is affecting my family. We have the opposite views. We're not proud to be white. We're not white because we chose to be white. We just happen to be born white. So it's nothing to be proud of. It's just a fact. On the other hand, targeting people on the basis of their race for destruction is the reason we say we hate the Nazis. And yet that's absolutely happening globally in every white country. Australia, New Zealand, Great Britain, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, England, the United States, and Canada. That's an accident? It's not an accident at all. And no one will say anything about it.
That's not true, Tucker. We've been saying it for years. You're just not listening.